Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. If you've been listening to our podcast, you'll know that over the last couple of weeks, I've been talking to Cody Hedgecoth. And during our last interview, Cody was talking about how we can learn valuable lessons from people who have been in certain situations. And he specifically mentioned our guest today as one of these people who he greatly respects and admires. So today, Catrina Cabe joins me for what I know will be an extremely beneficial and enlightening conversation. Catrina, welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't we start from the very beginning? I know the basics of your story, but many listening to the podcast do not know who you are or what your life consisted of or what your life used to be like. So I'm just going to let you have the mic and share what you feel comfortable sharing. So just go back to the beginning and fill us in.
Sure, I'd love to. I was born non-traditionally to two high school students. My father was the most handsome homosexual boy that Ringgold High School has ever seen. And my mother was a sassy redhead at Ringgold High School, and she was 16 and he was 15, and they were trying to figure out the world and life, and I'm the result, so I'm their answer to the world. Yay. So after that, things went awry, and my father went out of the picture and went on into his own life, and my mother got married to another man. It ended quickly in a divorce because she married someone who she thought could take better care of us because he sold weed and he sold pills, and he seemed to have more money, more going on than my regular first stepdad did. Mm-hmm. You're going to get very confused about the daddies in this story, so just accept it.
All right.
So then my mom had another child with that man. He settled down and he quit dealing drugs, but he wouldn't hold down a job. They had another child, and that's my sister. And they got divorced when I was 7 and my sister was 4. Since that day, my mother has been drunk. She started off as a very high-functioning alcoholic. So basically, I never felt like I had a solid place. I never had a firm ground to stand on. I grew up thinking that my sister's father was my daddy, but I never really felt like I fit in anywhere, like there was something different about me that wasn't the same as anybody else. You know, people think that kids don't know if you don't tell them, but they know. They might not know what it is, but not knowing what it is so much more dangerous than just knowing the truth.
Yeah.
So the man I call daddy was very physically abusive, and my mother was physically abusive as well. When she left him and she got with Bob, she became very, very passive. Basically, we could do whatever we wanted to as long as it wasn't in front of her. She tried to be really, really strict and really authoritative, but because she was drunk by 5 o'clock, I mean, we basically had free reign to do whatever we wanted to within the confine of the yard and the woods surrounding. Mm-hmm. My stepdad started giving me alcohol and cigarettes and letting me cuss, and like I would get in trouble at school and we would get pink slips sent home back then. We didn't have cell phones. Like, I'm super old, Parker. We didn't have cell phones, so we got stuff mailed in the mail, and my stepdad, he would sign them for my mom and then hide the receipt for it and say, I'm not going to tell your mom. And what I didn't know during this time is that he was grooming me. He was grooming me for sexual favors and sexual behavior, which really, really scared me. Now, I had told him stories because, I mean, I'm 13. I'm grown. I'm smoking cigarettes. I'm drinking liquor. I'm saying cuss words. Like, what's the next grown-up thing you do? Sex. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling him, I had sex with this boy or I had sex with that boy because, like, I'm feeling grown up. And for once in my life, I feel like I'm the one who has firm ground and I'm the one who fits in and nobody else does. Like, nobody knows my secret, that I fit in somewhere, that I'm not the weird kid, because I definitely was in school. Today, I still am, and I embrace that. Back then, it wasn't so easy to embrace.
Yeah.
So my stepdad, he was a pretty easy abuser. I've heard some real horror stories from other girls, and I don't want to make it seem like I was the child locked in a closet and starved to death. That was not me, but I have a very low tolerance for stress and anxiety and being told what to do. I'm a natural born leader. And so I made the decision early on at 13 years old that I wasn't going to live this way anymore. That with my mom being drunk, with my stepdad being touchy-feely, I tried to live with my daddy for a while. Around that time, I found out he wasn't my real daddy. So, hello, identity crisis. He was physically abusive still. My new stepmom was physically and spiritually abusive. I want to say that when I was younger, when mom and daddy were married, we did go to church. And that's where I discovered God. That's where I met Jesus. That's where I learned all my Bible stories and all of the important things that fuel my life and my motives today. Mm-hmm. When she got with Bob, all of that ended. And then when daddy got with a stepmom, she was very mentally ill. And unfortunately, in America, I don't know about other countries, but I've seen it a lot in America, that mental illness will take a lot of aspects of Christianity and use them to abuse people. She did that with me, and she would hit me and kick me and scream at me and cuss at me and speak in tongues and throw holy water on me. And so I remember the last time that I left their house at 13, because I left several times at 13, but this was the last time I left. I was talking to God, and I was walking along that dirt road, and I said, God, I don't know what Lord she's screaming about back there, but it's not you that I remember from when I was a little girl. Mm. And I knew that terrible things would happen to me out on the streets, but I just could not bear to give somebody complete control over me anymore who was going to treat me poorly.
Right.
So that began the beginning of 20 years of sexual exploitation, which began as survival sex. And I would do this for drugs, for a place to stay, for food to eat, to have a social network, to have that group, to be cool, to live, to breathe, and I wound up, by the time I was 15, I was in and out of juvenile detention centers, halfway houses, group homes, things like that until I was 15, till I found myself in West Virginia. So I decided to stay there because they didn't have extradition laws for juveniles who had run away from home. I'm really good at finding loopholes in the system. That's why I studied criminal justice later on in my life.
So you went from Chattanooga, you'd been in the Chattanooga area up until that point, and then when you were 15, you ended up in West Virginia?
Well, my daddy lived in North Carolina, so in between Ringgold, the Chattanooga area, and North Carolina, where my dad was.
Okay.
Yeah, so I met a boy. He said, I'm going to West Virginia. You want to go? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. Okay. So, we wound up there. I stayed with lots of different drug dealers, like never like the big drug dealers that you see on the movies. Like, I'll give you an example. One place that I stayed long term, my husband and I visited it a while back, and the house is condemned now. But upstairs, where the big upstairs window was, that's where the guy's sister lived, and she sold bags of pot. So in our eyes, she was big time, because we lived in the basement and we sold pin joints of marijuana, and that's how we got by. So when I say that I grew up, exhibiting sexual behaviors with drug dealers, it was very low level drug dealers. Like, I'm not a big deal. I'm not big time. Like, I am the very, very bottom of the barrel scrapings when it comes to drug dealing. Yeah. But by the time I was 18, I was really sick and tired of that lifestyle. I was really sick of living in basements with losers with their moms upstairs screaming, "Come get this hamburger helper." Like, I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And so I went and tried to get a real job. I was not prepared for a real job. I was not prepared for the sustainability. I had always, lived by instinct and survival even before I left home. That's what I was doing, instinct and survival, getting by. So that didn't last very long, and I found myself in a strip club. And over the next 7 years, I worked in 5 different states. And I really fell in love with that kind of a lifestyle because for the first time in my life, men had to give me all their money, but they couldn't touch me. Man, was that powerful. Mm-hmm. Man, was that a deception from the enemy, because the enemy had just completely distorted what God meant for men to be in his kingdom. To me, they were just survival mechanisms, a way to get what I needed, a way to get what I wanted, and that was it. And I knew that they only wanted one thing for me, so my worth was nothing and their worth was nothing. Mm-hmm. I really, I began seeing the girl in the mirror that was dancing as a different person because I don't know how to dance. You can ask my husband. I have no rhythm. But somehow I turned this into a 7-year career, and I would watch that girl in the mirror, and I'd think, man, she's going to make all my dreams come true. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just so much money, making hundreds of dollars every night. All my dreams are going to come true. But for 7 years, I was homeless, and I lived in a van for most of that time, and I spent all of my money on drugs because I'm an addict, and that's what we do. When we get more money, we get better drugs, and that's what I did. When the strip clubs were done with me, and they were done with me because I was so skinny, I had track marks all over my body. I mean, I just completely destroyed my body. I wasn't making the money that I used to make anymore. They picked me up and they threw me out the back door like a piece of trash. And the only thing that I knew that was in my skill set to do, the only thing that the world had shown me at that point that was of any worth, of anything I had to offer, was my body. And so it wasn't a hard transition into prostitution. I prostituted for, I guess, the next 7 or 8 years of that, and I contracted HIV as a prostitute. I don't know exactly how I contracted the virus, whether it was through sex or through shared needles. The one thing that I do know is that I take full responsibility for it because I've always been a smart girl. I got my GED before I would have graduated high school, just to prove a point to my loser drug dealer boyfriend that said I couldn't do it. I've always been pretty sharp. Yeah. And I knew the risk that I was taking, so I fully accept that today. And I'm grateful that God can take the brokenness of my medical records and use them to help other ladies who may be suffering with the stigma of HIV. Yeah. After that, I became broken. I went into Hamilton County Drug Court. I successfully completed that program. I got married. I started my own organization called Cry for the Broken, and we help girls like me. And I own a home out close to the water. I won't reveal where for safety reasons. But it's really close to the water, and it's really beautiful, and I got a little dog, and I got a husband, and I got a back deck and a hammock, and people ask me, what else do you want? And I'm like, how could I possibly want anything else? God has already given me so much more than I could have ever hoped or dreamed from. Sorry, I really messed that up. But he's already given me so much more than I deserve, so much more than I could have ever possibly dreamed up for myself. I don't tell God what I want anymore. I'm like, hey God, what do you want and how do I get it? Mm-hmm. Like that's my control now. God has full and complete control of me. When the Holy Spirit moves me, I move.
So let's go back a little bit to what event made you open your eyes? Like what took place that you stopped and you said, you know what, enough is enough? Was there some catalyst that brought you out of that world into, God's revelatory picture that he had planned for you?
There absolutely was, and it was no one singular incident. I am far too complex for that. It took several catalysts, as you said, in order for me to come to Christ. He was relentless in pursuing me. So one day in particular, it was raining and it was sleeting and it was snowing, and I was on 23rd Street, where Central Park is. I was on 23rd Street, and I was barefooted, and I was dressed in basically filthy rags because I've been wearing the same clothes for God only knows how long. I was absolutely disgusting, hadn't bathed, hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and I was absolutely broken. I walked under this underpass, and I'd had this feeling for days that Satan was following me, that he was on me, that he was out to get me, that he was trying to kill me. And so I remembered what some church ladies from the jail I had been incarcerated said. They said, if you just tell the devil, get behind you. Well, that sounds really simple, doesn't it? So I stamp my foot and I say, Satan, get behind me, stop following me. And I heard a voice, just as clear as mine, laugh and say, I'm not following you. You're following me.
Wow.
And it scared me to death. And I turned the corner, and I'm walking across broken glass, but I can't even feel it cutting my feet because my feet are so cold they feel like they're on fire. Have you ever been that cold?
No, I haven't.
To where your skin burned? You can ask any homeless person, and they'll tell you how real it is. And I started screaming at God. My hands were lifted up to the heavens, and I'm screaming at God, hey, do you not even see me anymore? Do you not know what I'm going through? Can you not hear me? How long, God? How long are you going to leave me out here like this? Like it was his fault, not mine.
Right.
And this lady, this beautiful African-American lady with green eyes, she comes out of nowhere, man. She grabbed me by my shoulders and she shook me back into reality. And she says, he wants to know, are you done? He wants to know, are you through? Because he is sick of your promises and he is tired of your lies and he just wants you to come home. And I was like, whoa. I just screamed at God, and he just stepped out on the sidewalk and he answered me. So she took me across the street and she bought me something to eat, and she says, you have one more promise to make and break to him, and he's going to let you die out here. And that was just further confirmation, not that I needed it, that God was speaking to me through this woman, because the only prayer I had said for 5 years was, God, please don't let me die out here. Don't let me die like this. I could be so much more than a crack-addicted prostitute. Like, I envisioned people standing over my grave and just shaking their head and going, man, that's all she ever was. And I could not bear that thought. I knew that there was this wonderful person inside of me just dying to get out.
Yeah.
So you would think that such a spiritual experience, God grabbing you by the shoulders and shaking you and talking to you would be enough to make you drop everything and just follow him now, but not for a junkie like me. It took a process after that of Karen Brown and her friends would come into Silverdale, and Karen Brown would be somebody wonderful for you to talk to, by the way, on your podcast. She is amazing. Okay. She came into Silverdale, and they began doing different things with me than the other congregations would, because we had church like 3 times a day from 3 different churches. But Karen and them, they would let me set up the chairs. They would let me put out the hymnals. They would let me pick the songs. Sometimes they would let me lead the songs that we got to sing. Sometimes I could tell my testimony. They really made me feel like I was a part of something, kind of like how my stepdad did, only in a good way.
Right.
I had another footing. I had another solid ground that I could stand on. And what was funny is that I would leave there after doing all that service work, and then I'd come right back to jail, and they were just like, hey, girl, hey, what'd you do this time? Like, it wasn't a big deal to them. They didn't condemn me. And it made me start thinking. I was like, man, what kind of lives must these women have that they would come in and minister to somebody like me that obviously just don't get it? What kind of lives must they have that they would devote their time to somebody as broken as I am? And I started thinking, I bet they have green lawns, and I bet they have flowers in their yards, and I bet they got little dogs, and they've got hardwood floors. And God spoke to me, and he said, you can have that too. And I didn't believe him. but it was worth a shot. And so from that point on, see, all the times before that I've been incarcerated, I had a plan for when I got out. This time I had a plan for while I was in. My behavior immediately changed. There was a revolution in my soul. My behavior immediately changed. My motives immediately changed. Everything completely changed. And the girls in jail still talk about it. When I tell my testimony, somebody always says, hey man, I was there. I saw it. I saw it happen. So I know it wasn't just something internal. It was something that everybody could perceive because I was buck wild.
Yeah.
I won't even say the things I would do in jail because this is a Christian podcast. But like I was really, really a wild child in jail, and it all stopped right there. And I began doing things like leading Bible studies and leading prayer circles, like not just in church, but back in the dorm in my me time.
Yeah.
I began devoting myself to Christ Jesus. And I remember the day that they discharged me, when they said bed and bags, which is the cause for the greatest celebration in all of jail history, bed and baggage, I cried. I said, I don't want to go. I'm afraid that I won't take God out with me again. I'm afraid that something will happen. And he spoke these words to my heart. And he had spoken them to me once before, but he spoke them again. He said, do your very best at each task that I set before you, and I will take care of the rest. I'll tell you what, my best really sucks, and all the glory goes to God. All the glory goes to God for everything I am, for everything I have, for any part of me that anybody perceives to be good. It is him, because I've got a mugshot that can show you what I can do. Yeah. And the result of the woman that you see sitting here today, this is what God can do. I didn't do any of it.
Katrina, you've hit on a couple points that I want to pursue. We've talked in this podcast a lot about what the church should look like today, and so we've talked about the lion part. The broadcast name is The Lion, the Way, and the War, and what that is. The lion is obviously representing Jesus.
Absolutely.
As the Lion of Judah. The Way is referred to in the Bible as his church. It's called The Way, as one of the names, and we've dealt a lot with that. But the war, that last part, we haven't really dealt with that. And you've said a couple things that have triggered me to think about the real spiritual battle that you were waging. Not some metaphysical idea, but an actual physical battle that was taking place, and Satan really, really trying to pull you back into that world, to give you this idea that you had no worth whatsoever. And when you just said when you left, you were afraid to leave because you were afraid of what you might get pulled back into. And that calming reassurance that God has on us when we know we're probably going to step back out into something and we're going to trip and we're going to fail, and God is still going to take us back time and time and time again. Like the Israelite nation, that they're like the unfaithful bride that keep cheating over and over and over again. And God is so merciful, and he's so gracious, and he's so patient. He continues to take them back. And so all of that said, to basically just give you another platform to talk about that battle that was being waged, and how you were going back and forth, and just the struggles of the spiritual warfare that was taking place in your life during that transitionary period.
I love it. It's appalling to me how not difficult it is to listen to you and listen to the Holy Spirit at the same time, because the Lord is just speaking to me, Hosea. He's just speaking to me, Hosea, and he's speaking to me of my own journey of having to fight and defeat that spiritual battle within myself before I could ever go out and show somebody else how to do it. When we think spiritual warfare, we think about out there.
Yeah.
The spiritual warfare that we're called to battle is within. We have to make, when I say we, I mean the church. I mean us. I mean we.
Yeah.
we have to deny our flesh every day. We have to set aside the things that are not pleasing to God every day. We have to, if we need to, fall prostrate to God in battle every day. And we do this in the Spirit of Jesus Christ out of great love, that we can prepare ourselves to go out and battle for others. You know, I'm far from perfect, Craig. I'm probably the most sinful Christian I know. Like, I'm not even a good Samaritan. I'm an okay Samaritan. Like, I'm a very okay Christian. Yeah. But the work that God does through this okay Christian is appalling. It's astounding. He amazes me every single day. He amazes me. You know, when we empty ourselves of self, we leave room for the armor and the work of God. Yeah. So I think, you know, you had asked me what's important for college kids to know. You know, I went to college and I did a deep psychological study of college kids. I do that to everybody I meet. Deep psychological study. It's a survival skill. And what I found is that with a lot of college kids and kids that grow up in the church, they think that there is nothing wrong with them. They don't have any problems. I would encourage you to find that problem and go to war. Mm-hmm. Go to war, because it's going to give you purpose. It's going to give you the ability to reach out to your brother or sister and say, hey, I spot it because I got it, and I overcome it because I serve a God who is greater than man.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Let's talk a little bit, Catrina, about the, because you didn't just clean yourself up and clean your life up and now everything is fine and you just go on your merry way and, hey, thank you, God, for helping me through this. You took it a step further than that and you kind of put the feet of Jesus back onto it and are giving back in the way with your organization, Cry for the Broken. So how did that come about? Like what happened that you said, you know what, I have to do this?
Well, you know, I was barely into the life that God had begun creating for me. I was living in a rat hole apartment. It was just absolutely hideous. People were selling drugs in the hallway and drinking 40s on the stoop, and it was like, what up? When I walked by, it was like not Christ-centered life at all. But it was so wonderful to me. I was so amazed and so filled with gratitude that I could actually sustain a place to live and like pay up 6 months worth of rent and go to school. Like, my mind was blown. I was like, whoa, I've got to go back and tell the other girls that when cotton candy Christianity church people come and say, Jesus has a plan for you, that it's not just something that they say to sound churchy, like he for real does. Like, this is a true story, real thing. Like, come with me. And that, to me, like hearing me say it out loud, man, isn't that discipleship? Like, we're called to discipleship because when we've been given the revolution of life by Jesus Christ, how can we not go back out and tell others?
But a lot of people don't.
Well, they're really missing it, because I don't have to do this, I get to.
Yeah.
That's the key right there. I hear so many people say, if I'm going to be a Christian, do I have to do this and do I have to do that? I'm like, dude, you've got it twisted. You get to.
Yeah.
If you're a Christian, you get to do these amazing things. So, like, if you're not doing that, you're missing something. I pray for you. I pray for your soul. And I encourage you to seek that out within yourself, because if what God has given you is only enough for you and not everybody else, then God didn't give it to you.
Yeah. So what exactly is Cry for the Broken?
Cry for the Broken is a church-centered organization, church-led organization that goes out to the streets twice a month and ministers to the girls who are actively walking the streets. We also take referrals from other agencies. If they have a girl that they know is participating in any form of sexual exploitation, they'll call us. I'll come in, I'll do an assessment. I'll see if the girl's willing to let me help her or not, and then I refer her to a Christ-centered 12-step program designed specifically for her needs, and it could be anywhere in the United States.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
7 years.
So tell me a little bit about the impact that's having here in the Chattanooga area that you're specifically involved with.
That's really hard for me to say, because I don't like to boast in my strengths. I really prefer to boast in my weaknesses and show the strength of God. God has God has transitioned over 50 women out of Chattanooga, and most of those women return to the streets. But when I think about how many catalysts, as you call it took for me to come off the streets, I'm more than happy to be that person who sends them off and they come back, send them off and they come back. I spent my whole life being Gomer. Now I get to be kind of a Hosea, and God gets to do that through me, and it's such a cool feeling to like just let go and let God do his thing.
Yeah.
I think it's also opened up the eyes of a lot of college students. I've spoken at the Christian Student Center here, of course. I've spoken to UCM. I've spoken at UTC Criminal Justice. I've spoken at Chattanooga State Criminal Justice. We had a sex trafficking conference at Cleveland State last year. We wanted to do it this year, but COVID.
Right.
I feel like awareness is key in handling this issue and dealing with this issue. I also feel like people need to know, because a lot of people are afraid to do what I do. If God is calling you to do it, then fear is a liar. Mm-hmm. If you have a calling to hug a homeless person, if you have a calling to love on a prostitute, if you have a calling to hold the hand of somebody with a needle in their arm, if God is calling you to do that, then fear is a liar, and that is the war that you need to wage within yourself, is to die to that flesh and that fear and do what Dad tells you, because I'm telling you, Dad knows best.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting on what James said is, we are not to be hearers only of the word, we are to be doers. And it's just a matter of saying, Nike has a great slogan, just do it.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, a lot of times that's what it is just getting the impetus to take that step forward and just, I just need to take this one step and just be active on what God has led in your heart to do. And I think that stops so many people, that fear, that hesitation, that, well, what if I fail? What if I mess up? And that's just the thing. I mean, God is trying to put in us. I read somewhere that God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called. And I think that's a great way to look at things, because no matter what shortcomings you have, what brokenness you have, all of the hang-ups, self-doubt, all of that kind of stuff, just think of the transition that we can make collectively as the Lord's church if we all en masse acted upon what we are being called to do. It would change the world, and it would probably change it overnight.
Jesus would come back a day early, Craig.
He just might do it.
I'm telling you.
He just might do it. So let me ask you this, Catrina. We because somebody coming from your background, there has to be, I believe, after hearing your story, a great amount of respect and weight that should be given to your words, because you've lived a life. I mean, you have lived a life, right? I deal with college students, and one of the biggest things I deal with here as a campus minister is guys and girls, makes no difference. But primarily the ladies coming in are coming in, and they've already been beat down. They may have not been living your life per se, but their feeling of self-worth that Satan has planted, and they may have done a few things that they're not proud of, and it just eats them alive. And they think, you know what, I don't deserve to be a Christian, or God will never forgive me because what I've done is too dirty, it's too nasty, it's whatever. And so they come in and they're already broken, and Satan is just yanking on them. What advice do you have? Go back to 18, 19 years old, and if you could transition as an 18, 19-year-old, fast forward today, and tell these girls, give them some type of advice, what would that be?
It would be what God spoke to me this morning. He said, I can give you all the wisdom in the world, but you won't be wise unless you use it. Again, he could give you all the knowledge in the world, but you won't be knowledgeable unless you use it. It's back to what we were just talking about in James.
Yeah.
That, you're here in school to better yourself. Stop focusing so much on what you think the world thinks of you, and focus more on what wisdom has taught you through the Word, and start believing who God says you are. Because you can have the knowledge of all the encyclopedias. I'm showing my age saying encyclopedias. You can have the knowledge, I'll say, of the internet.
Yeah.
But you're nothing but a dusty laptop if you don't ever open it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely.
So you want to be something? Do something. My husband says if you want to have self-esteem, do esteemable things. If you believe that you fall short, then where do you fall short? And pick it up a little bit, sugar, because God created you to be beautiful and more than a warrior.
Yeah. So let's talk. You brought your husband up, and I meant to ask, and I forgot. And then since you mentioned him again, where does he fit in all of this? Because I'm really interested to know how you met him and how that all came into play.
Oh my goodness! I prayed for a husband, and God sent him. And for the first time in my life, I found a man who would do what I told him to do, and I married him. I mean, he is just absolutely wonderful. He is the quieter in our marriage. I seem like a leader, but I'm really not, because it's very important to me that my husband lead, the decisions of our household, and he does a wonderful job of that. But I'm the more social, outward person, and he is the quiet, still, small voice, just a little bit louder than God, that keeps me grounded and keeps my ego in check, and does assessments of my behavior that I'm not willing to face, and I'm able to accept that from him because he comes from love. He's a chemical operator for a chemical factory north of Cleveland, and he's just the smartest person I've ever met. He's the best. He's the handsomest, the smartest, the sweetest, the kindest, the most supportive. Like, we've made an agreement that we're never going to die, because, I don't think that heaven could get much better than my days with my husband.
So how did y'all meet?
So my husband found me on Facebook, and he messaged me, and he asked me out on a date. And, I was even though I was praying for a husband, I was very suspicious of every male on earth. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, buddy, if you want to see me, you can come to this AA meeting. Like, I was working for a rehab, and I was having to transport clients to an AA meeting. You're welcome to come sit on this AA meeting, and you could sit next to me. Like, what a privilege that must have been. Mm-hmm. And so he came, and, we sat there grinning at each other like two kids. And he called me afterward, and he said, I'd really like to see you again, but there's something that I have to tell you. And I don't think you're going to want to see me after that. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, buddy. Wait till you learn about my history, criminal and otherwise, and HIV and everything else. So I'm like, all right, go ahead. What is it? Just tell me. And he's like, well, I'm HIV positive. And I was like, boy, shut up. So am I. And, I had this deal with God. I said, God, my picker's broke. I'm going to pick the biggest idiot. I'm going to pick the one that's going to hit me, beat me, steal from me, talk bad about my mama. Like, that's who I'm going to pick. So I need you to send somebody with flowers so that I'll know they came from you, and that's who I'm going to marry. About 2 weeks after Justin and I started dating, he showed up at my door with flowers, and I started screaming right there in the doorway, and I said, that's it, we're getting married. He said, okay. And that's our love story.
So I'm assuming you all are involved in church, and he's did he come from a religious background, or did you guys find that together? My husband was raised Seventh-day Adventist, and he also has his own addiction history that I'm sure he'd love to share with you one day. And, we both came back to Christ together. He was coming back to Christ the same time that I was. Wow. Isn't that interesting that God brought two broken people together and you made that journey? That's a whole nother podcast, I think. I think it is too. So you all are actively involved in church. You're worshiping God. He's part of your everyday life. He sustains you, and he blesses you. And I think he's definitely blessing the work, and I think that is self-evident. Some things are harder to listen to than other things, but some of the hardest things to hear are the things that we need to hear most. Catrina, I want to sincerely thank you for your honesty and your heart, your willingness to expose those vulnerable aspects of your life, because there are people listening right now that need to hear what you had to say. And I want you to know that. And I don't think anything is a coincidence anymore. You're here today for a reason, because there is somebody out there that needs to hear what you're saying. And really, yours is a story of God's love and redemptive power. And we all need to hear that. Okay, we need your feedback. I'm always looking for suggestions and ideas on how to improve these episodes to bring relevant issues and topics that will be encouraging and helpful and even challenging. And you've certainly challenged me today, Catrina, and I appreciate that. So let us know if you're listening. Let us know what we can do. If you like what we are doing, help me get the word out and share these podcasts, because I think there's a lot of people that would benefit from what we're doing and what you're hearing. Final thoughts. Isaiah 44:22, I have swept away your offenses like a cloud, your sins like the morning mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. Until next week, love each other, be kind to one another, and know that you are adored and cherished by the King of Kings and the Creator of the universe and all that exists. Have a blessed week.